Thousands of people are already voting across the North Country, and Election Day is just 6 days away. So today, we have a pair of voting stories. One on Proposition 1, a proposed change to the state constitution, and one on the people helping voters navigate a somewhat complicated system. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And from SciTech Business Solutions, training and consulting services to help businesses grow. More information at citec.org.
Hey, I'm David Summerstein. It's Wednesday, October 30th. When you go to vote this week early or on Election Day, turn over your ballot to vote on Proposition 1, the Equal Rights Amendment to the state constitution. It would extend discrimination protection to several new groups. Proponents also say it will, quote, enshrine abortion in the state's constitution. But not all legal experts agree it's that simple. Jesse King reports for the New York Public News Network.
When we fight, we're gonna win, y'all.
On a soggy morning in Warriors Park in Poughkeepsie, Democrats like New York Attorney General Letitia James and Congressman Pat Ryan from the 18th District are speaking out in support of Proposition 1, also called the New York Equal Rights Amendment. The state constitution already shields New Yorkers from discrimination based on race, color, religion, and creed, but Prop 1 would expand those categories to include sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, pregnancy, and pregnancy outcomes, including abortion. Here's James.
We've got to flip the ballot over and vote for Prop 1 because a lot of people think we're in a safe state, but we can't take that for granted, and that's too much of a gamble.
Abortion is legal in New York for any reason up to 24 weeks of pregnancy. The vote on Prop 1, regardless of the outcome, won't change that. The proponents say the amendment would make it harder for state lawmakers to restrict the procedure in the future, as has happened in several states since the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. Democrats have been leaning into the issue of abortion rights, in part to mobilize their base in campaigns ever since. Some Republican candidates have been doing the same by attacking Prop 1, claiming its protections for gender identity would encourage transgender students to play on girls' sports teams, something that's already allowed in New York, and allow minors to pursue gender-affirming surgery without their parents' consent, something that isn't. Vincent Bonventry of Albany Law School says Prop 1 would do neither of those things, but he doesn't think it will enshrine abortion either, at least not on its own. Bonventry says the bill's language does not explicitly list abortion as a fundamental right for New Yorkers. It simply says you can't face discrimination for getting one.
It does not preclude legitimate, restrictions on abortion. And so, for example, if we get a conservative Republican administration in the governor's office, and they control the Assembly and the Senate, there's nothing to stop them under this proposition in the state constitution. Nothing to stop them from enacting legislation that pretty severely restricts a woman's right to choose.
Cameron McDonald with the Empire Center for Public Policy says how Prop 1 is interpreted will ultimately depend on the New York Court of Appeals, as state laws, past, present, and future, face legal challenges.
If it passes, I think it's going to be sort of open season in the courts, challenging laws and so on.
This is something McDonald worries about. If so many classes of people are elevated to a protected status, how might the court decide in cases where they conflict with one another, like religion and sexual orientation? McDonald says it's too soon to know for sure, but he wagers the courts could play an increasing role in the state's culture wars as a result.
We're going to have court-made civil rights policies in New York that will depend on who has the resources and the desire to bring litigation and obtain the results that they want.
Bonventry agrees Prop 1 would create significant work for the court, but he doesn't consider that a bad thing. After all, many of the constitutional rights Americans cherish have been hashed out in court. Back at the rally, speakers urged attendees to grab yard signs and vote blue down the ballot. Poughkeepsie resident Katie Height says she'll be voting for Prop 1, and she wants to ensure her friends and loved ones know what's at stake as well.
I actually grew up in Texas, and I'm watching what's going down, on down there very closely. So I'm a big fan of shoring up our rights in the state of New York to ensure that we protect everyone's right to choose.
Mimi Timaraju, president and CEO of the advocacy group Reproductive Freedom for All, says make no mistake, this election will come down to abortion rights. 21 states have banned or heavily restricted the procedure since 2022, and there are ballot measures in 10 states this November.
Nebraska has competing ballot measures, and whichever ballot measure gets the most votes is the one that wins. There's a pro-abortion axis and an anti-abortion axis, so it's kind of getting crazy out there. But New York is really important. The fact that New York is such a progressive state and it doesn't have the protection of the Constitution is worrisome.
Election Day is November 5th. In Poughkeepsie, I'm Jesse King for the New York Public News Network.
Officials try to make voting as easy as possible, but elections can still be kind of tricky sometimes. Dates and rules change. You have to remember your polling place. Maybe you're on vacation or taking care of a family member, so you have to plan to vote early or absentee. So ahead of Election Day, groups around the North Country hold events to get people prepared. Catherine Wheeler stopped by one of them in Watertown and has this story.
Cynthia Graham knows the drill. She's been voting for a long time, but every year she still has questions about the process.
I'm always a little confused about when to send in for the ballot, early voting. I always get the dates a little mixed up.
Graham says she wants to make sure her absentee ballot counts, so she showed up with a couple of friends to a voter information night in Watertown to get the details straight from the source.
They're very clear. They have all the information, so I just get reassurance that I'm doing it correctly.
Before every election, the American Association of University Women's Jefferson County chapter holds one of these events. President Jordan Walker says they bring in the county's election officials to lay it all out.
They just have a really nice nonpartisan platform so that everybody can see from both the Democrat and the Republican perspective without any kind of bias that here is exactly what you can expect from voting and how it works. And we're hoping that people will trust that process.
This year's event was at Jefferson Community College. In front of a classroom, there are stacks of resources: voter registration forms, absentee ballot requests, sample ballots, and lists of early voting locations. Michelle Lefebvre is Jefferson County's Democratic Election Commissioner. She says opportunities for the public to ask questions are really important.
Our biggest, hurdle right now is all of the mis and disinformation that's going around, and we just don't want to see anybody not participate in voting because they're afraid of something that they heard that wasn't true.
Civic engagement, election security, and the fight against disinformation are pillars of our democracy, so it's important that people can ask questions and get answers. But the problem is, only a few people showed up to this session in Watertown. Cynthia Graham says it's disappointing that more people didn't come.
Maybe everyone thinks, I know how to vote. And maybe they don't have the curiosity as to understand thoroughly how important every vote is and to ensure that the vote is actually counted properly.
Sessions like these could be a great starting place for new voters in Jefferson County. Lefebvre says lots of them have registered for the upcoming election, which is to be expected. Turnouts for presidential election years are typically higher than others. Lefebvre says at these events, they also try to get voters to engage even more. They encourage voters to pay attention to statewide and local races and to vote at every election.
We can have those conversations with them and, hey, don't forget next year. And I just hope that people understand that their vote really counts and it matters and it makes a difference, especially in the local races.
Early voting is already underway in New York. It wraps up on Sunday, November 3rd. Absentee ballots must be postmarked by Election Day, November 5th, to count. You can also drop those off at your local election office by the time the polls close on Election Day. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio in Watertown.
We have all the details you need to vote early or on Election Day at ncpr.org. Our election guide right at the top of the page, ncpr.org. Music today by Christopher Watts and Danny Thomas, both from Canton. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.